welcome to episode 8 of HiFi Hole, the hi-fi podcast that puts you and the music first. Welcome, thank you for joining me. Now, I have to offer a slight apology up front. I am really struggling with hay fever right now, so if at any point I start coughing or spluttering or sounding very nasally and congested, well, my apologies. And if you too suffer with hay fever, you have my sympathies. It is not the nicest affliction to have. In this shiny new episode, I'm going to be taking a look at adding a streaming capability to an existing hi-fi. This was a question that came up recently in a group I frequent, so I've decided to discuss it. Why not? The scenario is this. You have a hi-fi. It comprises speakers, an amplifier, a turntable, or a CD player, or perhaps even, if you're eccentric like me, a cassette deck. Maybe, if you're more sophisticated, a mini disc recorder. Maybe you have picked up some vintage pieces from eBay or inherited a receiver from your grandparents. At this point, you want to add streaming to that hi-fi, cost effectively. You want it to be easy to use. You want to listen to Tidal, Qobuz, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Deezer, or one of the many other streaming platforms. Maybe you want to rip your own CDs, put them on a music server, and then use them with your streamer. If that's your situation, well, the good news for you is that I'm going to be giving my 2 cents here. My recommendation is going to be based on what I think is most cost effective, that is bang for buck, relative to what is going to be the most easy to use. I know there are cheaper options, but they require you to have a little bit more understanding about technology in order to implement them. And they come with, from my own experience, they come with some maintenance headache. So we're going for convenience and ease of use here. Now, before I move on, I should just say that this video is in no way, shape or form sponsored. I am not getting paid to say any of this. And when I say video, I also mean podcast, because not all of our listeners are on YouTube, of course. Yes, I am merely making recommendations based on my own experience. And I'm going to start with what I'm going to call the streaming front end, although it is a fully fledged streamer in its own right, but I'm referring to it as a streaming front end today for a reason that will soon become clear. I am, of course, talking about a device called the WiiM Mini. You've no doubt already heard of it, but hey, you haven't heard my take. So, I'm speaking particularly to the WiiM Mini because it is a simple and easy to use streaming front end. It has a mobile app which is a doddle to navigate, and it is actually, when you look a little bit harder at it, it is jam-packed with features. Not all of you will care about those features, but for those who want to get a little bit more, with room correction, for example, well, that's there. You can have at it. I think the WiiM is as easy or as complicated within reason as you want it to be, and I don't think you can go wrong. Not when you consider the price of the product and the quality of the mobile app, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. So, what does the WiiM Mini feature, I hear you ask? Well, it has a line level analog input, 3.5mm socket. It has yes, I did say input because it also has a line level analog output, which is also a 3.5mm socket. It has an optical digital output too, and it is USB-C powered. It can support PCM audio up to 192 kHz, 24-bit resolution, which is more than good enough in my opinion. and it's about the size of a hockey puck. For £89 or 89 US dollars or 99 euros, it represents to me an absolute bargain. In fact, I have 3 of them around my home and a WiiM Amp Pro, and they are used more than occasionally for multi-room streaming. There is even one connected to my HiFi here, primarily because the WiiM products have Wi-Fi approval in this household, and that means that she can actually choose the music that's playing. There's a secondary reason as well, which I'll just briefly touch on. I mentioned there is a line level analog input, and some of you may be wondering, well, what is that for? It is for the inbuilt analog to digital converter, which can, of course, convert an analog signal from a turntable or a cassette deck or any other analog source you can imagine and convert it into a digital signal, which can then be shunted via the radio waves, the magic Wi-Fi, the devil's radio, to another WiiM player in the house. So you can sit downstairs on your sofa and listen to a record that's playing on your turntable upstairs if you so desire. I think the ADC sampling is only, I think it's 48 kilohertz, and I think it's only 16-bit in terms of its bit depth. So it's possibly not going to be audiophile, I should say, but it's good enough for casual listening. Okay, some numbers, some WiiM Mini specs. For the for the for the nerds amongst you, I will admit I'm a little bit of a nerd. I'm not going to say that the specifications matter that much to me, but I like to know what they are or what they profess to be. The WiiM Mini has a signal to noise ratio on its analog output of 106 decibels, which is not too shabby at all. It has total harmonic noise and distortion of 0.0025%, which again is not to be sniffed at. On paper, these figures, they seem quite credible to me. That said, despite those reasonably good numbers, the WiiM Mini's inbuilt DAC, even compensating for its slightly lower gain on the analog output stage, does not sound as good as other DACs that I've listened to. I don't find it to be as resolving, and I don't find it to have all the heft. This drawback, though, it's unsurprising given A, price, and B, the diminutive size of the WiiM Mini. And even with that said, I still think it is still probably good enough for most people. Don't forget, the Mini is small enough to use in a semi-portable setup. You can attach it to a Bluetooth speaker and a power bank, and you can use this thing in the middle of a field if you want to. And I will go on to say that WiiM do sell some higher priced products, none of which, and I'm not including the WiiM Amp Pro, which I do have experience of, because that is also an integrated amplifier. So barring that, the higher priced WiiM streamers, I do not have any experience of, so I can't really comment on them. But I will say that the WiiM Pro, which is another sort of plastic device, it's probably more like how am I going to say this? It's not as small as the WiiM Mini, but it does have the same DAC chipset and has similar numbers in terms of its analog output. So I'm not sure I really see the point in spending the extra that it costs. At the next tier up, there is the WiiM Pro Plus. WiiM Pro Plus, sorry. And that starts to make a little sense. It gets an AKM4493 EQ DAC, which makes better numbers. And then the top tier WiiM streamer. You've got the WiiM Ultra, which gets a ESS Sabre ES9038Q2M DAC. That makes fantastic numbers. It has a display, which makes it a great value proposition if you want a streamer that displays album artwork or provides more possibility for interaction. And the prices for those, the WiiM Pro is £149 or USDs, US dollars, USDs, €179. The Pro Plus is £219 or US dollars and €249. And the WiiM Ultra is £349 or 329 US dollars or €399. Oh, it's a bit of a mouthful getting all those prices out of the way. But we're talking about budget options here, remember. And I think you can get WiiM Ultra Performance for the price of a WiiM Pro Plus. So let's just rewind a little bit. The difference between the Pro Plus and the Ultra in pounds, British pounds, is, I'm working off the top of my head here, but that looks to me to be £130. So that is not an insignificant saving. So, what is my recommendation for the best bang for buck streaming solution? Well, of course, I'm going to stick with the WiiM Mini, but I'm going to add to it an external DAC. This is a best of both worlds approach. You retain the ease of use of the WiiM ecosystem, convenience as well, I might add. You keep the WiiM Mini's diminutive size, and you get an external DAC which you can use with your HiFi system. An external DAC that has some other inputs. So you may choose to start using it with some other digital sources. For example, a CD transport, or perhaps even a mini disc deck that has a digital output. Maybe a DVD player for playing DVD audio, or a Blu-ray player for playing Blu-ray audio. Yeah, there's lots of possibilities. So the external DAC adds some extra flexibility to your hi-fi system, and that, I think, has a value. It's a value proposition. Sorry, I need to get myself back on track. I am experimenting between, writing bullet points and scripting, and I keep flitting between the two. I've gone for a sort of hybrid approach here, but with the congestion from the hay fever that's in my head, I think it's affecting my ability to pass the information I put in front of me. I'm hoping we get some sort of normal service soon, but in the meantime, we shall plough on. We shall carry on regardless. He says, stalling for finding the appropriate prompt. Okay, so we're talking about keeping the WiiM Mini but adding an additional separate DAC in order to address the WiiM Mini's shortfall in sound quality when you use the WiiM Mini's inbuilt DAC. The model I'm going to suggest here has 3 inputs. It provides a quality headphone amp into the bargain. And the best part is this combination still comes out cheaper than the WiiM Pro Plus, at least in the UK. This is for those of you who are more discerning music listeners, or perhaps have a better resolving hi-fi system. Many people will be happy with just the WiiM Mini on its own. For the earlier iterations of my hi-fi, the WiiM Mini would have been more than adequate. Now though, there is a benefit from something more resolving. Yes, enough waffle. What is it, you say? For a budget DAC, I am recommending the FiiO K11. Not the R2R version, which is available in the UK for an additional £30. I'm meaning the straight, simple FiiO K11 with no extra bells or whistles. It retails for £119, 142 US dollars, or €139, or at least those are the prices that I've been able to find for it. You may do better. These prices, of course, are correct at the time of recording, and it goes without saying it is often worth waiting for deals to crop up on the K11, as they often do for these types of devices. Okay, moving on. Why do I like the K11 so much? And that's, once again, for the avoidance of doubt, the K11 with the Delta Sigma DAC, not its more expensive sibling with the R2R DAC. Which, of course, you are welcome to consider that option if you want to spend that extra £30. The K11, it comes with a discrete power brick. As I already said, it has 3 inputs: coax digital, Toslink optical, and a USB input. It also has a pair of RCA phono outputs for connecting to your HiFi system and input on your amplifier, preamp or integrated amplifier. Interestingly, the coaxial input can also serve as an output. So if you have a mini disc recorder with a coax input, for example, you could be recording to mini disc as well as listening to your streamer via this wonderful little DAC. Yeah, I think that adds even more flexibility, which is worth noting. For the hi-fi nerds amongst us, this DAC has a Cirrus Logic CS43198 DAC chip. The signal-to-noise ratio is 123 decibels. The total harmonic distortion and noise figure via the line outputs is claimed to be 0.00035%. And that on paper easily bests the WiiM Mini and is on par with the WiiM Ultra. Anyhow, I'm not even sure these comparisons are valid. Having said all that, I have no evidence that the WiiMs and the FiiO were tested in the same way, so I'm not even sure that the measurements can be directly compared. Maybe if I'd have looked a bit harder, I could have found some testing methodology. But yeah, I think it's safe to say that really the specifications, they are kind of useful, but only to a point. What I can say is, to my ears, the WiiM Mini used in combination with the FiiO K11 sounds better than the WiiM Mini on its own, significantly better. So much so that I would be content to use that combination as an everyday streaming option instead of, say, my Cambridge Audio CXN100. In fact, when I consider the price difference between the CXN100 and the K11 and the WiiM Mini together, one could almost think, or be forgiven for thinking, that I've wasted a whole hill of extra money on the CXN100. Perhaps. The CXN100 does have some benefits. First of all, it has quite a large display for displaying album artwork. It has more physical buttons on it for interacting with it. It does have some other advantages as well. So we're not really comparing apples to apples. But if we're considering sound quality as our sole criteria, sound quality, and sorry, not sole criteria. If we are considering sound quality and cost as our 2 sole criteria, then I would say the WiiM Mini and the FiiO K11 win. But when we factor in other features and the fact that I personally enjoy supporting UK companies, then the Cambridge Audio CXN100 does become a contender. Right, back to the K11 and the WiiM Mini. I find that this combination, it's resolving, it sounds clean, and it is what I would describe as neutral and competent. In all honesty, I think this streamer and DAC is all most people, including most discerning audiophiles. It is all they need. There's certainly no night and day difference between the FiiO and any other DAC I've owned, excluding the WiiM Mini's onboard DAC, of course. And of course, I'm excluding DACs which bring their own tonality. I'm talking about those with valves in the output stages and possibly those which are deliberately engineered to sound a little bit warmer. Yeah, there's there's also another killer feature of the K11. Apologies for that little pause. In advantage to its credible performance at a DAC, as a DAC, which I quite frankly think is almost unbelievable at its price point, it is also a headphone amplifier. It is rated as a headphone amplifier at 520 milliwatts into 32 ohms for the 6.3mm single-ended connection, and a whopping 1400 milliwatts into 32 ohms on the 4.4mm balanced output, which I think is more than enough for most use cases. Now, I know there will be at least one person, if not many, of you listening to this and thinking about streaming options that are cheaper still, as I alluded to, or at least meant to allude to in the earlier part of this recording. A Raspberry Pi, for instance, running Volumio or HiFi Berry OS, could be had for £40 or £50, depending on which generation of Raspberry Pi is opted for. But by the time you've sprung for a power supply, a case, a micro SD card, there's not much change from £100. It could at least be connected directly to an external DAC via USB, but then you've got to find that external DAC. Or it could be used with a Pi hat, like one of the HiFi Berry HD Pros for a digital output. I forget the name actually of that other hat, which has got the analog output stage on it. But yeah, that's going to jump the cost again. So I think you could be into this for almost as much as the K11 and WiiM combination. And on top of that, there is some hassle factor. You're not buying a couple of products that work out of the box. You've got to set the thing up, which entails downloading a disk image and flashing it onto an SD card, doing some configuration to get it all up and going. Don't get me wrong, this is how I started out. And I confess, I had two Raspberry Pis for streaming in the house. One in my HiFi, one connected to the earlier iteration of the dining room HiFi. And yeah, I just on one particular day, I found that one of them would no longer boot, and then the other stopped starting its Docker container, which was employed to support Tidal Connect, and yeah, it just baked my noodle that day. After that, I swore off using the Raspberry Pis because I didn't want to make my music and hi-fi hobby start to feel. I didn't want them to feel like work, and that's all I'm saying on the matter. For the privacy conscious, ripping CDs, stashing them on a music server, and building some DLNA streaming clients, all using open source software, is absolutely the way to go. But for everyone else, I'm still sticking with the recommendation of the WiiM Mini with the FiiO K11. Okay, with that covered, I think we've concluded this episode's discussion. Do you have any comments? Anything you'd like to throw in the mix? Honestly, I will give you the right to reply. If you do leave me a comment in the below the video on YouTube, or you leave me a comment sent via email to hifi-hole@biscuit.ninja, I will very happily mention it on a future episode of the podcast. I want to make this podcast just as much about you as it is about me. And in order for that to happen, I need your interaction. I'm friendly, I promise. I will not bite. With the discussion out of the way, it is time for the formalities, our standing agenda items, of which there is only one this week. And that is new to me on physical media music. A delivery person has this week delivered 4 compact diskettes. These arrived at HiFi Hole HQ a little bit earlier in the week. They are all by one artist, Agnes Obel. I believe Agnes Obel has featured in one of our prior album recommendations. And I have bought her entire back catalogue of studio albums. So we have 2010's Philharmonics. We have 2013's Aventine. We have 2016's Citizen of Glass. Let me just move that slightly so my light is not creating glare on it. Apologies for those listening. And finally, we have 2020's Myopia. All of these I have been listening to this week, and I will say I've been rather enjoying them. Right, that concludes Hi-Fi Hole for this episode. Thank you so much for listening along, particularly for bearing with me with the whole hay fever situation. I look forward to catching you next time, and in the meantime I will say, happy music listening. All the very best from Hi-Fi Hole to you.